All right, everyone, welcome to the calculation movie for the final milestone. So we're going to be working on the alternative costing method. I'll let you read the details here on your own. Uh, here's some very important information we'll work through, and that'll be in the Excel spreadsheet. And if you're watching this video, then this is the answer right here, time-driven activity-based costing. This is the answer to your next section of milestone 3. This should be what your paper's written on. Time-driven activity-based costing. That is the answer. So can't stress that enough. Let's look at the what the requirements are. So one, we need to calculate the allocation rates for each cost driver using ABC. Two, use the traditional costing approach to calculate the total cost and the unit cost of the stick and collapsible umbrellas. Three, use the ABC method to compute the total cost for the stick and the collapsible. And then fourth requirement, compute the difference between the product cost for each method. So let's take a moment and work through each of those calculations. One thing, I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but let me mention it a couple more times. The time-driven activity-based costing is the answer for milestone 3. So make sure that you look at this and this is your answer. All right, so let's calculate requirement 1 here. So this would be for each activity. So the cost for order processing, let me just fix this where we can actually do some math inside of Excel. So order processing is 35,000. Purchasing is 36,000. If you notice, I use formulas. That way I always know where the numbers come from. Machine setup 14,000, right? Production 99,000. Assembly 80,000. Inspecting 11,000. And shipping 7,500. Now, what's our allocation base? Yeah, that's really, really key. So our allocation base would be order processing, would be number of sales orders here, right? So this is stick and collapsible. So it would be 121, right? So here, order processing, sales orders, 100 for stick, 1 for collapsible, 121. Purchasing, that would be purchase orders, so that would be 50 plus 3, 53. Material handling, right? So material handling would be what? Material moves, I think, would be the answer to that one, right? If I'm not mistaken, yes, material moves would be the answer to that one. 86 plus 10 is 96. Machine setups would be 130 for stick, 6 for collapsible. Production, let's see here, production would be production runs. So how many times you're going to make your umbrellas. Assembly is machine hours. Machine hours. Inspecting would be, anybody have an idea on inspecting? Would be inspections, right? How many items that you're looking at. Inspections. Same for shipments, the number of shipments you make, that's the activity driver. Now the allocation overhead rate per piece would be, the cost for that activity divided by how many times you do that activity, right? And then we just copy that down. So that's requirement 1 completed. All right, so let's calculate requirement 2, which is the traditional costing method. So first thing, let's put a formula in here to make this a little simpler for us. All right. Okay, so the revenue for stick umbrellas would be, let's go back up to our data sheet at the top, is how many they've sold times selling price, right? 750,000. The same for units sold for collapsible. So our sales under the traditional 792. Okay, let's do the same for direct material cost per unit. $3 times 60,000, right? Collapsible, 3,000 pieces times $3.10, so $189,300. Direct labor, 60,000 times direct labor, 450,000. Oop, well, I did something wrong there. Let's see what I did wrong. That's way too much. I did not take it times the direct labor hours per unit, right? Because it's not a one-for-one relationship. So it's 60,000 pieces times the direct labor rate, and it's not a one-for-one, so it's 90,000, right? So let's just copy that over here, see if we can get the formula to work. That's correct. Variable overhead rate. So how are we applying the variable overhead? It's just per, is it per piece? Yes, it's per piece. So here it's per piece, variable manufacturing overhead per unit. Right. Correct. Variable selling cost, which is in here per piece, per unit, and allocated fixed overhead. So how do we get the allocated fixed overhead? So that is back in the the written guidance that let me pull it up here in the Word document. And the variable fixed overhead, let's see here. So it was, sorry, I was not paying attention. It's $24.60 per labor hour is the variable, right? So over here it's $24.60 per hour. Come down here, let's say 20 equals 24.60, and that's per hour, right? So we would have to calculate per hour, so we would need to take the stick umbrella times the direct labor input, right? Yes. So then our total cost, and that would make our operating income revenue minus total cost. So 103,440 under the traditional cost method. All right. Right, so I put in the operating income percent here. So as you can see, it's just operating income divided by sales, and then the income cost per unit, which is just the operating income divided by the total units up at top, so 158,288. Yeah, so then I went ahead and pre-populated requirement 3, revenues down to variable selling cost, because the rest of that stays the same. Now let's talk about the activity-based drivers, right? So the activity-based drivers here would be order processing cost. So that would be number of sales orders times the average overhead allocation rate that we calculated over there, right? Make sure I got that correct. Yes. So let me calculate the rest of these. Let me do this one here on the collapsible umbrella. So that would be the 1 times 289. Yep. That would give us 35,000 for the average or for the order processing cost. So let me calculate the rest of these just to save us some time. Okay, so I went ahead and calculated each of the activity driver costs. So basically the driver and the stick and the collapsible times the overhead allocation rate that we calculated comes up to 647, 515, and then 41, 585. And let's just do the operating income calculations. So you can see using the activity-based method that you're allocating costs more accurately. Under the traditional, you would only show that you were making 95,000, 94,800 on the sticks, whereas in an activity-based, you'd be making more, 102,458. So the sticks looks much favorable compared, like a 1% favorable, whereas collapsible, you think you're making more, but you're really not making as much as you think. B3. Right. So here we went from making 158 under traditional to 171 under activity-based, 288 under a traditional method for collapsible, and we're making 14 cents. Yeah. All right, so let's do our total cost per unit. That way you can see it just a little bit better. So here it's the total cost, I think, yes, divided by the units, which is in B3. Here it's total cost divided back by B3. And then the difference here. You can see the cost difference. Same here, divided by C3. And then here, divided by C3. So that gets you requirement 1, 2, 3, and 4 calculations. Requirement 5, you should know the answer here. It's ABC gives you a better allocation of the cost is basically the answer here. So hope this video helps you out. Sorry it's a little long, and I tried to cut some time out by doing some of the calculations in the background. The only other thing that I want to touch on, I think I've touched on it about 3 or 4 different times, and let me mention it again. The answer to milestone 3 is time-driven activity-based costing. That's the answer. That's the key. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Hope you have a great week.